So empathy is an interesting thing. A lot of people don't realize that my earliest gig as a therapist wasn't working with families and couples and all the fun stuff. I got
Yeah.
thrown into working with death penalty inmates who had committed, 5, 10 murders. And that was my very first gig. And
Oh my God, damn.
it was
Like, welcome to
fantastic.
the deep end.
It was
Yeah.
fantastic. Fresh out of school, and they were like, "All right, you will work with people who've killed 5 people, and then they will come in and they will tell you how they were justified and how it was that person's fault for having been murdered."
And this wasn't on Zoom, was it?
No, no, no. So they would walk them in. They'd put me in a room. They'd walk them in. They'd shackle them to the floor, and then I'd sit there across the table from them and speak to them. How you doing? You're shackled to the floor. You're going through a trial for the death penalty. So I would work with these individuals, and many of them did lack empathy. But we would, so I would jump into it, talking about them, and say, look, I would like to understand you and help you stop killing people, hopefully. But let's talk about where you're at, and let's talk about it. And they were so suspicious at first that I would care about them being in pain. And then as they came to understand that I actually did kind of care about alleviating their pain, it wasn't just a paycheck, then they said, well, they'd start sharing with me about their pain. And as they did, they'd look at me with this really sharp look on their face, like, how are you going to use this information against me? So the only mechanism they understood was that nobody else was going to care about their pain at all. So their ability to care about other people's pain diminished to essentially zero. Then they could do whatever they had to survive, because the idea in their head was, I am only doing less than what someone would do to me if they got the chance. Whether they were assaulting somebody, murdering somebody, just taking from somebody. The goal was never to murder somebody. The goal was to get something, and they didn't care what the outcome would be for the other person. And their justification was, everybody on earth would do exactly the same thing to me if they got the chance. So the ability to understand that your pain does matter to another human being, that in essence does foster the empathy that you can then have the luxury of caring about somebody else's pain.
And this is an interesting point, because what this symbolizes to me is that empathy can be taught, right? Empathy can be taught using a painful experience, because the act of love is to care about somebody else's pain.
Well, and to that, I had one fantastic client come in. He was in his 40s. He had just had his first child with a young woman. But he was in for committing, I think it was Grand Theft Auto at the time. But he had killed people before, and he was in a gang, and he was now going to drop out in his 40s and be targeted for killing by his gang. But it was because he now had his first child. And he started developing this sense of, look, it's not my pain anymore. Now my son is going to be in pain. And that was his moment where he said, I'm going to change everything, even if it does kill me. So I had to help him foster this new empathy and what it even meant. How would you care about your child's pain? Maybe the child's mother's pain. How can you start actually caring for that without being debilitated and collapse into codependency? More what Mark was talking about there. How do you navigate this careful balance between not caring and over caring?
Well, especially building the capacity to even hold, because if you're going to start to be empathic and feel pain and start to process things, let's say in your 40s or your 30s, and you don't even have to be a murderer for this to be true, or someone who's committed crimes, is that you all of a sudden have to process how desensitized you've been to your own suffering. So that's why I think so much grief, like a divorce, a breakup, a loss of a job, a health thing, you're activating old grief. And so now you're getting hit with the Rolodex of all these experiences that from a survival perspective, you've learned to disassociate from. And I think for men especially, which obviously this can be true of either sex, but for men especially, there's been so much like just plow forward, do the thing, get it done, go to war. And even when we come back, and obviously women go to war now, but we come back and then there's no service or support. It's like, just hide it, put it down, plug it down. Here's an antidepressant. Here's an anti-anxiety drug. And again, it's like we don't have these. I think a lot about how in our families, in our cultures, in our communities, we don't see someone suffering as an opportunity to be a teacher to the community. Like when someone goes through a divorce and they feel like and their experience might be exile from their community, which that happens a lot. It's like, imagine if the community said, like, teach us, like, what didn't work? What did you learn from that? And then now it's not a source of shame, it's a source of teaching. And that has been wild to me, that we actually shame people who go through breakups because they're walking through one. We might be jealous that they've liberated themselves, and so we want to liberate ourselves. But instead of actually stepping towards liberation, we shame their behavior because it's easier to keep them back in line, than to start to challenge a system. And I think the other side of that is that we don't know how to be with the grief of endings. So we like exile this person out of it instead of actually seeing how powerful and potent that is. And imagine if community said to people like, wow, we love you no matter what you choose. Oh my, what is possible when that is the way we orient to each other?
If you like this clip, I know you're going to enjoy the full episode. You can watch it right here.